The sky over Lake Michigan was soft gold when Margaret stepped onto the porch with her morning coffee. The lake stretched wide and calm, small waves tapping gently at the shore. She had come to her summer cottage alone again, as she had every year since her husband Edward passed away 5 years earlier. The cottage was their place built together, board by board, painted by their hands, filled with laughter that now lived only in memory at 68. Margaret moved a little slower, but her eyes still carried the same spark that once charmed her students. Retirement had given her time, but also too much quiet. She used to joke that silence could be beautiful, but lately it felt heavy. She came to the cottage hoping peace would visit her again. The first morning followed its usual rhythm. She unpacked, dusted the wooden shelves, and placed a fresh vase of wildflowers on the kitchen table. Every corner of the small home still whispered Edward's presence, the coat hook he had hammered slightly crooked. The faded photo of their first summer here, his fishing hat still hanging by the door. She had tried to pack it away once, but couldn't. Some memories deserved sunlight outside. The neighborhood was waking up. Children's laughter echoed from the next cabin, and a couple walked hand in hand along the dock. Margaret smiled at them, though her heart ached quietly. She remembered when she and Edward used to take evening walks just like that, counting the stars, promising they would grow old together right there by the water. They had almost made it after breakfast. She sat on the porch swing and opened the worn journal she carried everywhere. The pages held small pieces of her heart-told letters, recipes, dreams, and the notes Edward used to leave her. She wrote a few lines about the morning, paused, and then added one more sentence. "It's quiet again, but I'm trying to be grateful." Her children had wanted her to go somewhere livelier. Her daughter Laura had said, "Mom, come visit us in Denver. The kids miss you." Margaret loved her family, but she needed this lake, the smell of pine, the sound of waves. It was the last piece of the life she had shared with Edward. By noon, she took a walk along the shoreline, sandals in her hand, the cold water touching her toes. A group of teenagers splashed nearby, and for a moment she remembered bringing her own kids here. Time had slipped by too fast. Now she mostly received phone calls full of background noise, grandkids laughing, someone cooking, everyone in a hurry. She didn't blame them. Life moved quickly. But sometimes she wished someone would just sit still with her. The evening light faded into deep orange. Margaret made pastou, the same kind Edward loved, and sat by the window. Eating alone still felt strange. She raised her glass toward his photo and said softly, "Here's to another summer, Ed." After dinner, she stepped outside again. The lake reflected the stars perfectly, and a cool breeze brushed her face. She thought about how lucky she had been to love someone so deeply. Still, that luck made the emptiness harder. "I'm okay," she whispered to the wind. "I'm still here." The next few days passed slowly but peacefully. She read old novels, took long naps, and listened to the radio. Yet every night before bed, she caught herself talking to Edward. It wasn't habit, it was comfort. One morning she woke to rain. It poured softly on the roof, filling the air with the scent of wet earth. She brewed coffee and wrapped herself in a blanket by the window. The world outside looked quiet and gray, but she didn't mind. Rain meant the lake would shine brighter afterward. Her phone buzzed on the Taboola message from her grandson. "Noah, have a great trip, Grandma. Wish I could come, but work's crazy." She smiled. Noah was 23 now, studying business in Chicago. He had always been thoughtful but busy, living a life so different from hers. She replied, "Thank you, sweetheart. Don't work too hard." She read the message again before setting her phone down. Part of her wished he would surprise her someday, but she quickly brushed the thought aside. People his age had no time for long drives to quiet lakes. Later that day, she visited the small town nearby for groceries. The shopkeeper recognized her from past summers. "Good to see you again, Mrs. Langley," he said cheerfully. She smiled. "Good to be back." On her way home, she stopped by the bakery and bought a single slice of apple pie. It used to be their tradition: one slice, 2 forks. Back at the cottage, she placed the pie on the table and laughed softly. "You'd say it needs more cinnamon, wouldn't you?" she said aloud, pretending Edward could hear her. Talking to him had become second nature. That evening, she took her old camera to the dock to capture the sunset. Clouds drifted low, turning crimson and gold. As she focused the lens, she saw two swans glide together across the water. Something about them made her eyes fill with tears. They stayed side by side, their reflections touching. For a moment, she felt Edward beside her again. The next morning dawned bright and warm. Margaret was journaling on the porch when she heard an unexpected sound, a car door closing. Confused, she stood up and looked toward the driveway. A silver car was parked near the pine trees. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a tall young man in jeans and a sweatshirt, carrying a travel bag and 2 cups of coffee. Her breath caught. It couldn't be Noah. She called out, her voice trembling. He grinned widely. "Hey, Grandma. Hope I didn't scare you?" Margaret blinked in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" He walked up the steps, still smiling. "Surprising you. I finished work early and thought, why not drive up? I brought breakfast." Before she could stop herself, tears filled her eyes. She reached out, hugged him tight, and whispered, "Oh, Noah, you shouldn't have." He laughed. "Of course I should. You think I'd let you spend the summer here all by yourself?" For a moment, neither of them spoke. She just looked at him, the same bright eyes she remembered from when he was a boy chasing dragonflies by this very lake. He had grown taller, his voice deeper. But the kindness in his expression hadn't changed. They sat together on the porch, sipping coffee and watching the waves roll in. "You really drove all the way from Chicago?" she asked. "Yeah," he said with a grin. "It was a long drive, but totally worth it." Margaret smiled through her tears. "You have no idea how much this means to me." He shrugged casually. "Well, I figured you might get bored of your own company. Plus, I've never actually seen this place properly. You always talk about it like it's magic." "It is," she said softly, "and now you'll see why." That afternoon, they walked by the lake together. Margaret pointed out old landmarks where Edward had taught her to fish, where they used to set up picnics, where the maple tree had fallen in a storm years ago. Noah listened with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing at her stories. His presence brought the cottage back to life. That night, they made dinner together. He insisted on cooking, but quickly burned the garlic bread. She laughed until tears ran down her cheeks, something she hadn't done in years. Later, they sat outside wrapped in blankets, watching the stars come out. "I can see why you love it here," Noah said quietly. "It's peaceful." "It's home," she replied. When she went to bed that night, Margaret felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, warmth that wasn't from a blanket or the summer air. It was the warmth of belonging. As she closed her eyes, she whispered to the darkness, "Thank you, Edward. You must have sent him to me." Outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt whole. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the cottage floor, waking Margaret earlier than usual. The faint smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, and for the first time in years, she didn't have to make it herself. She smiled when she saw Noah standing by the counter, humming softly, wearing her old apron that was far too small for him. "Morning, Grandma," he said cheerfully. "Hope you like your coffee, how I remember 2 sugars, no cream." She blinked, surprised. "You remember that?" "Of course," he said, handing her the mug. "You're the one who taught me how to drink coffee. I was, 10?" She laughed, the sound light and genuine. "You hated it then." "Still kind of do," he admitted, grinning. "But it's tradition." They sat together at the small wooden table, sunlight dancing through the window. Margaret noticed how easily Noah filled the room with warmth. He had Edward's steadiness, that quiet strength that made people feel safe. "So," she said, "what made you come up here, really? Don't tell me it was just boredom." He shrugged. "I needed a break. City, life's noisy, everyone's rushing. Thought it'd be nice to just slow down." Margaret nodded. "You sound like your grandfather." Noah looked curious. "Was Grandpa like that too?" She smiled softly. "Always. He used to say, rushing through life makes you miss the good parts." That day, they decided to explore. Noah offered to drive, and Margaret found herself in the passenger seat again, just like she used to be beside Edward. The road wound through forests and quiet lakeside towns. They stopped at a farmer's market where Noah insisted on buying too much fruit. He carried the bags, joking that his grandmother deserved to shop like royalty. Later, they had lunch at a small diner by the highway. The waitress, an older woman with silver hair, smiled when she saw them. "You two make a lovely pair," she said kindly. Noah chuckled. "Thanks, but she's my grandma." The woman's eyes softened. "Then you're lucky. My grandson won't even answer my calls these days." The words stayed with Margaret long after they left. She felt proud and lucky to have Noah there beside her. That evening, back at the cottage, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The water shimmered gold and birds drifted low across the lake. "Grandma," Noah said suddenly, "do you ever get lonely out here?" She took a breath, staring at the horizon. "Sometimes. It's peaceful, but quiet can turn into loneliness if you're not careful." He nodded slowly. "I get that. I feel lonely sometimes too, even with people around." His honesty surprised her. You're young, surrounded by friends." He shrugged. "Maybe that's the problem. Everyone's always online, pretending they're happy. But it's hard to find something real." Margaret looked at him carefully. "What do you want to find?" He thought for a moment. "Something that lasts. Not just work or money, something that feels like home." She smiled sadly. "That's what your grandfather gave me." They sat quietly after that, the only sound the soft lap of water against the dock. It felt like the years between them disappeared. The next morning, Noah woke early and fixed the squeaky door that had annoyed her for years. He even repaired the loose step on the porch. "Can't have you tripping," he said. She laughed. "You're turning into your grandfather more by the minute. Guess it runs in the family," he said proudly. Each day brought small joys. They went fishing, though. Noah caught nothing and fell into the lake trying to reel one in. Margaret laughed until her stomach hurt, and he joined in, dripping wet and embarrassed. Later, they built a small bonfire by the shore, roasted marshmallows, and watched sparks rise into the night. "You know," he said, "poking the fire, I used to think growing up meant leaving everything behind. Now I think maybe it's about finding your way back." She smiled. "That's a lesson most people don't learn until they're much older." He looked at her. "Then maybe I'm learning from the best." Her heart swelled with quiet pride. The following day, rain returned. The two stayed inside, playing cards and listening to old music. Margaret found one of Edward's favorite records, soft jazz, that filled the small living room. Grandpa liked this kind of music. Noah asked. "Oh, yes," she said, smiling. He said it made every day sound like a love story. They listened for a long time without speaking. Then Noah said softly, "I wish I'd known him better." Margaret nodded. "He would have loved you, Noah. You have his heart." He looked away for a moment, swallowing emotion. "You really think so?" "I know so." That night they made dinner together again. Noah took charge of the pasta, determined to prove he could cook. He didn't. The sauce was too salty, the noodles too soft. But Margaret pretended it was perfect. "You're being polite," he teased. "I'm being kind," she replied with a wink. After dinner, they sat outside with blankets, listening to crickets sing. The air smelled of rain and pine. The stars came out one by one, scattering across the sky. "Grandma," Noah said quietly, "you ever wish you could go back? Like, when everything felt new?" She considered it. "Sometimes. But I think if we keep wishing for the past, we miss the beauty that's still here." He nodded. "I guess that's true. I've been so focused on what's next that I forgot to enjoy what's now." Her eyes softened. "That's what growing older teaches you. The present moment is all we ever really have." They sat there for a long time, the night calm around them. Margaret felt something shift, not in her surroundings, but in her heart. For years she had carried loneliness like a shadow, but now it felt lighter. Noah didn't fill the silence with words. He simply was there, and that was enough. The next morning he surprised her again. When she came out to the porch, she found the old family photo album open on the table. "Where did you find that?" she asked. He smiled. "I brought it from your house. Thought we could look through it together." They spent hours turning pages, her wedding photos, their first house, Christmas mornings with children in pajamas, birthdays by the lake. Each picture carried a story, and each story carried laughter. "Look at your mother," Margaret said, pointing to a picture of Laura as a teenager, holding a giant fish. She hated that day, but smiled anyway. Noah grinned. "I think that's where I get my fake smile from." They laughed, and for a moment, it felt like time folded, past and present, blending into one beautiful afternoon. At one point, Noah paused at a picture of Edward. Standing proudly with his arm around a young Margaret. "He looks happy," Noah said softly. "He was," she replied. "We didn't have much, but we had love, and that was enough." He looked at the photo for a long moment. "That's the kind of love I want someday." Margaret's heart ached in the best way. "You'll find it. But don't rush. The best things come quietly." Later that day, they took one last walk around the lake before the weather turned cold. The sky was soft blue, and the air smelled like rain waiting to happen. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Sometimes silence said more than words ever could. When they returned, Noah built another small fire in the fireplace. The glow filled the room with warmth. Margaret sat in her armchair, knitting quietly, watching him work. There was something healing in the rhythm of that day. Like her world had regained color after years of gray dot as the evening came to an end. She watched Noah staring into the flames, deep in thought. She sensed something on his mind, but didn't push. Instead, she said softly, "You can tell me anything." "You know." He nodded, but stayed quiet. His eyes on the fire. The room was peaceful, but beneath it, something was building, a truth he was holding, waiting for the right moment to speak. She didn't know it yet, but his words would soon bring her to tears. The next morning was quiet, too quiet. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean, and a thin mist hovered over the lake. Margaret woke early, her body still tired, but her heart lighter than it had been in years. She made 2 cups of coffee out of habit and waited for Noah to come downstairs. But minutes passed, then half an hour, and there was still no sound from his room. She was about to check on him when she heard footsteps. Noah appeared, his hair messy, wearing the same flannel shirt from the night before. He smiled faintly. "Morning, Grandma. Morning, sweetheart," she said warmly. "You sleep all right?" He hesitated. "Barely." Something in his tone caught her attention. "Is everything okay?" He nodded slowly, but avoided her eyes. "Yeah, just been thinking a lot." Margaret knew that look, the kind that meant he was holding something heavy. She decided not to push, giving him time. They sat on the porch again, watching the mist rise off the lake. The stillness of the morning made everything feel fragile, like the world might break if they spoke too loudly. After a long silence, Noah finally said, "Grandma, I didn't just come here for a break." Her heart gave a small jolt. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly. "I came here because I was lost. I didn't know what to do with my life anymore." Margaret leaned forward, her voice soft. "You're young, Noah. Everyone feels lost sometimes." He shook his head. "It's more than that. I quit my job 2 weeks ago." She blinked, surprised. "You what?" "I didn't tell anyone, not Mom, not Dad. I just packed up and left." He looked ashamed, but Margaret didn't react with anger. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "Why?" she asked gently. "I was miserable," he admitted. "The job paid well, but I hated every second of it. It wasn't what I wanted. I kept telling myself to stick it out. That success meant money and status. But every morning I woke up feeling empty. I couldn't recognize myself anymore." He paused, voice trembling slightly. "And then I remembered this place. I remembered the summers here. When life was simple, when Grandpa used to say happiness isn't something you buy, it's something you build." Margaret's eyes softened. "He did say that," she whispered. Noah looked at her, his voice breaking. So I came here hoping maybe I could find myself again. I didn't expect you to be here. I thought the cottage would be empty." Margaret's lips parted in surprise. "You didn't know I was coming?" He shook his head. "I found out only when I saw your car in the driveway. At first I thought maybe I should leave. But when I saw you standing there, I don't know. It just felt right to stay." Tears welled in her eyes, though she blinked them back. "Oh, Noah." He sighed. "I thought you'd be disappointed in me." She reached out and took his hand, her touch steady and warm. "Disappointed? You think I've never been lost before? Life doesn't follow a straight line, sweetheart. The bravest thing you can do is admit when you've taken a wrong turn." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw a mix of relief and gratitude in his eyes. "I was so afraid to tell Mom. She's proud of me, you know. I didn't want her to think I failed." Margaret squeezed his hand. "Failure isn't falling down, Noah. It's refusing to stand back up." The words seemed to settle something inside him. For the first time in days, his shoulders relaxed. "Grandpa would have said something like that too," he murmured. She smiled. He probably would have added a bad joke at the end. That made him laugh, and the tension between them eased. They sat quietly again, the lake now gleaming in the morning sun. Birds fluttered by, and for a moment, felt like the world had given them space to breathe. Later that day, Noah said he wanted to take her somewhere. "You'll see," he told her mysteriously. They drove for almost an hour, through winding forest roads until they reached a small overlook with a view that took her breath away. Below them, the valley stretched wide and green, dotted with wildflowers and glimmering streams. "Oh my," she whispered. "It's beautiful. I found this place yesterday when I went for a drive," he said. "I thought Grandpa would have loved it." She smiled through a rush of emotion. He would have. They stood side by side in silence. The wind tugged gently at her hair, and she thought about all the years that had passed, all the people who had come and gone, all the love that had shaped her life. Noah looked at her, then said quietly, "You know, Grandma, you and Grandpa built something I've been chasing without even realizing it." "What do you mean?" she asked. "You had a life that meant something. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. You loved deeply. You built a family. You found joy in small things. That's what I want." Tears filled her eyes again. "Oh, Noah, you already have it. It's not something you find. It's something you choose every single day." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's why I came here. I needed to be reminded of that." They spent the rest of the afternoon walking through the woods, talking about everything: love, loss, dreams, regrets. Margaret shared stories of her early years with Edward, how they'd struggled, how they'd learned to laugh even when things went wrong. Noah listened quietly, absorbing every word like they were lessons from another world. When they returned to the cottage that evening, sun was low, painting the sky in soft gold and pink. Noah made dinner again, this time edible, and they ate by candlelight. The gentle flicker of the flame reflected in Margaret's eyes, and she thought about how rare it was to feel this kind of peace after dinner. Noah cleared his throat. "Grandma, there's something else I wanted to say." She looked at him curiously. "What is it?" He hesitated, then stood up and walked over to her. His voice trembled slightly as he began. "When I came here, thought I'd lost everything, my job, my purpose, my confidence. But spending this time with you changed me. You reminded me that success isn't about having everything figured out. It's about having someone to share the journey with. You reminded me what home feels like." Margaret's eyes glistened. He continued, his voice breaking. "I realized I've been chasing things that don't matter. What matters is this family, love, time. I don't ever want to forget that again." She couldn't speak. Her throat tightened, her chest ached with emotion. Then he leaned down and hugged her, really hugged her tightly, like he was holding on to something precious. "I love you, Grandma," he whispered. "You've given me more than you'll ever know." Tears rolled down her cheeks freely now. She placed her hands on his face and said, "Oh, my dear boy, you've given me something to hope. You reminded me that love doesn't end when people are gone. It lives on through us." For a long moment, they just held each other. The fire crackled softly, the clock ticked gently in the background, and the world outside seemed to stand still. Later that night, when Noah went to bed, Margaret sat alone for a while, thinking about his words. She walked to the mantel and picked up an old photo of Edward smiling in his fishing hat. "You'd be proud of him," she whispered. The wind rustled outside, and for a second she swore she could hear Edward's laughter in it, that deep, warm sound that once filled their home. The next morning, when Noah was packing to leave, the house felt different, fuller somehow. Like love had seeped into every corner. "Promise you'll visit again soon." Margaret said, "Sooner than you think," he replied with a smile. When he hugged her goodbye, she felt both sadness and peace. Watching his car disappear down the road, she realized something beautiful. The trip that started as a lonely getaway had turned into a healing journey for them both. She turned back toward the lake, the water calm and shining under the sun. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She felt surrounded by memories, by love, by the quiet strength of family that never truly fades. And as the breeze carried across the water, she smiled through her tears, whispering, "Thank you, Edward. He's going to be just fine."